Today I want to do a quick review on fractions before we move on to comparing fractions to decimals and percentages. We're going to do a comparing fractions, your basic fraction. Remember, fractions consist of two parts. They consist of a numerator, which is my top number, and a denominator, which is the bottom number. Two-thirds. Two-thirds tells me, again, my bottom denominators, 3 equal pieces in a whole. If I were to draw that as a fraction bar, there's my whole, and I have to have 3 equal pieces. My top numerator, I'm referencing, or I'm talking about 2 of those. So this is what 2/3 looks like. There's 2 of the 3 pieces. So if I were to compare 2/3 to, I'm going to use my same numerator, which is 2, which means I want 2 pieces. But now I'm going to take that whole fraction bar, and remember the denominator tells me 4. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to break it into 4 pieces. So now I have, first I'll go in half, and then I'll go half more. So now I'm talking about 2 out of the 4 pieces. So there's 1 and 2. So I'm looking at 2/3 or 2/4. If I split something into 3 and I have 2 of those, I've got a big part of that. I've got more than half of that. If I split something into 4 and I only have 2, I only have 2 pieces. So if I were to look at 2/3 or 2/4, the greater fraction would be 2/3. 2/3 is greater. The bottom denominator tells me how many pieces. So the larger the denominator is, that means the smaller the pieces. If my whole, which always stays the same, was 12, my denominator was 12, and I only had 2 of those pieces, those would be very small pieces. So when I'm comparing fractions with the same numerator, the smaller the denominator is, the bigger the piece. So I'm not splitting it up into smaller increments. So it kind of goes against whole numbers, because in whole numbers, the larger the whole number, it's the bigger, what I'm talking about, the bigger number. But in fractions, when the denominator's bigger, it's like the opposite. You're dividing it into smaller pieces. So I could have 1/6 or 1/3. So if I have that whole bar and I divide it between 6, it's going to be pretty small. Or if I have that whole and I divide it by 3, which one's going to be greater? 1/3. So 1/6 is less than 1/3. The bigger the denominator, the smaller the pieces. The same thing if I would change that to 2/6 or 2/3. 6 pieces, I've only got 2. 3 pieces, I've got 2. Which is greater? 2/3 is greater than 2/6. The bigger the number, the smaller the pieces. If I had 4/8 or 4/12, I'm taking that same piece, I'm dividing it into 8, or I'm taking that same piece and I'm dividing it into 12. Which one is greater? 4/8 or 4/12? Smaller pieces. 4/8 is greater than 4/12. What if I had 4/8 1/6 or 2/6. Now my pieces are the same. One of them or two of them. When the denominator is the same on the bottom, it's easier to tell. Two pieces are more than one. So keep that in mind when you're ordering fractions and you're deciding which one is bigger, that the bottom denominator, the bigger the number on the bottom, the smaller the pieces.